So Lutnick to Commerce, which we told you yesterday. Now, there's two guys who need jobs, Peter Navarro and Bob Lighthizer. I don't believe either of them is going to be Treasury Secretary, and I don't believe either of them is going to be head of the NEC. I could be wrong, but I don't think they are. So one issue is finding jobs for those two guys, both of whom would like jobs. Okay. Then the question is who's getting Treasury, who's getting NEC? John and I have both heard that a very strong candidate for Treasury is Mr. Warsh. John, do you know him personally?
No, I know of him.
Okay.
By reputation.
Okay, most of you don't know him. So let's look at some video of someone who's reportedly a top candidate, maybe the top candidate for Treasury right now. Most of you have never heard him speak. Take a listen.
They said for a long time, you'll recall a few years ago, they were for flexible average inflation targeting. So inflation, when it was at 1.7, they said, we'll get it a little higher. We'll try to balance around 2. They seem to have gotten rid of that idea without replacing it. Then they said for a long time, what really matters is core PCE. That's what we should focus on. About a year ago, they said, well, the best measure of inflation is now what they created a new category. And they said it was core services X housing. Well, that's in the 4s. Previously, Janet Yellen, and embedded in the Fed model, said what really matters is wages. And so we need wages to run at 3%, which is consistent with inflation running around 2. Wages are running around 4. All this is to say they don't seem to have a serious theory of inflation that's theoretical and empirical. It's not obvious that they acknowledge what their role is in prices. Instead, it has something to do with wars and pandemics.
Sean, if you were his media consultant, what would you say about that?
I mean, it's
how is he as a communicator?
I don't think he's the most effective guy in the world, but I don't know that that's what Donald Trump is looking for. He wants somebody that's going to buy into the tariff agenda. Warsh has a huge background. He has served as the NEC in the White House, so he's got that background. He was a Federal Reserve Board of Governor member. I mean, he's a Stanford grad, right? I mean, Trump talks about central casting, so he might not communicate perfectly. He presents well. He's got a pedigree background. And I think right now the word I'm getting is that Trump really wants somebody who is not going to, I've relayed this story in the past, specifically on DOD matters, where we would get into these briefings and people would start telling the president why he shouldn't do what he's committed to doing to the voters during the campaign and why he shouldn't do this. And I think he wants to make sure that his Treasury Secretary isn't somebody who starts pontificating about why tariffs really aren't the right thing and immediately pushes back. And so the question for Warsh is, yeah, you got the pedigree. Have you bought in on the agenda?
Dan, what do you think of Warsh, assuming that was your first exposure to him?
I actually think that was pretty good considering the audience. I mean, he was on CNBC talking about markets to people, who totally that is what they want to hear. If that was the speech at the Kiwanis Club in Green Bay, I would probably say we need to reevaluate how we talk about this. But I actually thought he was pretty calm. He was pretty measured, and again for that crowd, he made a pretty good case. And I think what Sean, just said is right. He wants people who are on the team who are going to be able to go out and execute what he wants, which is not unreasonable for a president to feel that way. And he seems like he's knowledgeable, so seems pretty good.
Here's what I'd say: if you're going to Ladbrokes with a $5 and you want to bet on the economic team, right now I would put $4 on Warsh for Treasury, Scott Bessent for NEC. However, I would take the other dollar and I'd flip them, and I'd put Warsh as head of NEC and Scott Bessent at Treasury. That's where I think it stands.
I think look, the thing that it matters is at the end of the day, we saw this with the AG pick. It can all come to a head, and suddenly, it's almost like flipping a coin. And I watched Stephen Mnuchin during the 2016 cycle really lobby for Secretary of the Treasury brilliantly, by the way. And there was it was a very similar situation. And he walked out and was like, put the release out. I mean, it was sort of like, let's bank this thing quick.
It could go to Rowan. It could end up being Rowan at Treasury and Lighthizer at NEC. Although I don't think so, but it could.